So could you please, before I get into the questions, please first tell us about your background, who is Nokwazi Mzobe and where is she from, and okay, and then tell us what inspired your transition from the corporate world into entrepreneurship and strategy consulting.
So I'm Nokwazi Mzobe. I'm from KZN. So I grew up in a township called Claremont. But I was fortunate enough to go to school in Eshowe and then later in Pietermaritzburg and then university in Durban. So, for me, when I talk about KZN, it's not just about Durban. For me, KZN, everywhere is home in a sense. Come from a family actually that has background in business. My grandfather was a business owner. He has an very inspiring story. I think my aunt used to tell us, and my mom as well. It's like, it's very important just to know what your grandfather was able to achieve during the days of apartheid. And for me, every time I think of maybe challenges I face sometimes, I always think that, hey, I come from a line where, my grandfather left rural KZN, came to Durban, was able to start some butcheries in different areas of Durban, even had a bus company at a certain stage. So, I come from a family that is quite entrepreneurial. And on my mom's side, I come from a family that values education. So my grandfather on my mom's side was an education minister. So I grew up in that environment. One side business, one side very education focused. Um, so varsity, I was at UKZN and actually studied a Bachelor of Science in cell biology. And then I added on psychology as a minor. And then came to WITS to do my honors in psych. And from there, I ended up at Procter and Gamble. And so that's kind of how my career started. But yeah, childhood was just very fortunate to just have a family. And for me, I always look at my extended family because, when you think about it now, especially when you're in Joburg and living alone and you all live our separate lives, um, just the privilege of having grown up with elders who were able to guide you. So for me, that's me in, I guess, in a nutshell. Very much defined by my family, my culture, and the examples that they've been able to set for me.
Thank you for clarifying that you got the business skills from your father. Ikufundisa lapha eBushara and stuff.
Yes.
So it was practically semi-mental, I guess.
Mm. Yeah, well, look, my father passed away when I was young. My father passed away when I was 12, no, 14. But my mom was also in business. So the nice thing that I mean, we were in boarding school, but when we were back home, um, I used to travel with my mother from when she used to go to the markets in the morning at 5 o'clock, the Durban market. Then from there, she used to go to the wholesale, and I'd see how she speak to the owners at the wholesale, how she spoke to people on the ground. Sometimes she'd place her orders before and things were ready and waiting for her. You know, from when they used to deliver meat because they used to have a delivery before delivery services were a thing. My parents' butchery used to deliver meat to different areas in Durban. And so, when I wasn't at school, I'd be in the car, with my mom, with the driver, and then my brother and I, sometimes on holidays, would have to go work in the supermarket and, pack stuff or till be cashier. So yeah, you're correct. All of us at home, actually were expected to work to a certain extent. And but this was obviously during the holidays. Yeah. So, my mom played a key role. Unfortunately, my dad passed away when I was very young, but my mom really played a key role in molding me. Um, and to me, she's probably been my number one mentor with regards to the journey in my career. Yeah.
Can you tell us the story behind the Matoyana and the gap you set out to fill in the SME and the sustainability space?
Okay. So how I started Matoyana, I had just come back from having done my MBA, and I actually wasn't sure if I wanted to go back to corporate. Because I just had this amazing year. I'd lived in the US and China, and I'd been exposed to just different people, different cultures, different ways of doing things. And I just thought to myself, I can't come back and just go back to corporate. I feel like I need to try another path. So I continued being on sabbatical and for a couple more months, and I decided to volunteer. And I started to volunteer for a program that was about empowering women with small and medium-sized businesses. Um, and so that's kind of how I started volunteering. I was a coach, I was a business coach. Um, and then at the same time, my mother, remember, she was just like, "What are you doing?" I'm just like, "No, I'm just volunteering." She's like, "Yeah, but where is it going to take you?" And I was like, "I don't know." And then the one day she's like, "Let's get into the car." And she took me to Cedar. I'm not sure where you're from, but there's a Cedar in Durban, just after the DUT thingy, and you cross over the bridge. The Cedar used to be there. And I remember my mom taking me there, and she was just like, "Open a company." And literally, yeah, open a company. And you said Matoyana, I said Matoyana. So whoever took the notes miswrote the name, and so it ended up not having the H, right? And but when it came, and I was like, "But they've misspelled the name." And my mom's like, "It doesn't matter. Now you have a business." So that I'm telling that story because when I was volunteering, people started asking me if I do what I do as a business. And at that time, I was like, "No, I'm on sabbatical. I'm still planning to go back to corporate to work." Um, until one of the people I'd met in the area, I mean, in the volunteer space that I was in, said, "I know this organization, they're working on a project, entrepreneurial project. They're looking for somebody with X type of skills. And I think you would be, you'd suit that role in terms of the consulting role that they're looking for." And I thought, okay, it won't hurt for me to go listen. And I went, I pitched, I got the work. And they were like, "You need to have a company, you need to have this." And guess what? I had a company because my mother 6 months ago had forced me to go open up a company. So, you know, Langelihle, a lot of times we think, it's about planning, and I had this big vision and I wanted to do this. For me, I literally stumbled into, because then all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, so now I have a consulting gig that's paying me, and it's a 6 month contract. And I'm still coaching and mentoring businesses on the side. And then some of those businesses started asking me, if I would spend more time with them and they'd be willing to pay me. And so then I started getting some small clients. And then the business school was just like, "Oh, we love what you're doing. Can you be one of our facilitators on our entrepreneurship program?" So then I started consulting to the business school. Um, so it really, you know, there's a saying that Oprah Winfrey says where she's like, there's no such thing as luck. She says it's when opportunity intersects to being prepared, to preparedness. And for me, honestly, what I think, my journey, how Matoyana started in consulting was not because had a plan. It was literally opportunity coming at the right time, and I was prepared and ready to make the most of the opportunity that came up. So that's how I started.
Yeah, yeah, you mentioned something very um astounding and very interesting because this thing, yeah, of just getting these people, these amazing guests and stuff like that, just learning how to make a call, like hello Johnny and stuff. It's like making a sale, but I actually learned that at a call center, right? So at a call center, SCI, you literally you make a call and you say, "Thank you for calling Real Insurance. You're currently speaking to Langa, and how may I assist you today?" So that's like you're pitching and you actually explain yourself at the same time, clearly with the short span of time, and then you're actually grabbing the clients to actually listen to okay, but local money,
Mm,
and it was
mm,
easy speaking to these high profile people, those guests and sending emails. I actually learned that we back office and then we in the sales and services sector. So it kind of helped me, in starting this thing, yeah. And so I actually resonate with what you're saying now. That's it's when preparation, it's when what? It's when
preparation meets opportunity.
yeah, preparation meets opportunity. So yeah, thank you for enlightening me a bit about that. Um, so I wanted to get into your book. Like, what motivated you to write the Small Business Handbook, and what do you think is the most overlooked piece of advice in it?
Mm. So, what made me write the book was my journey because, you know, Langelihle, you think, oh, I'm educated, I've been exposed, this, that, I'm now doing this thing, it's gonna come easy, and having been in corporate and, my career in corporate had gone well as well. So there's this idea that you start business and things will flow, but they don't flow because, like anything new, you've got to learn and you've kind of got to go through the trenches. And for me, I just remembered, having to look for an accountant, recognizing I had to renew CIPC every year, having to go back to my textbooks, my MBA textbooks for finance and strategy. And I remember I looked at the journey I'd gone through, but then I looked at the number of SMEs I was meeting, that the challenges that they were facing, and some opportunities they weren't able to access because they weren't prepared, because they didn't have the right systems and processes. And so I thought to myself, there has to be an easier way. Business is already a challenge in itself, but there are certain things that should just be straightforward. Like somebody should know where they can go register a business. They should at least know that don't waste your time as an SME trying to get bank funding. The banks are not going to fund you in the early days. They want to see that there's an actual business. And so people to understand, the routes they need to go for financing. But also, you can't get financing if your business is not structured and you don't have the right systems and processes in place. So people always say, oh, access to market, access to funding, but then you go sit with the businesses and you just like, you have no systems, your financials aren't done, when were they last audited? um and then it's like nobody's going to give money until you have the right systems and processes, and the things that the banks ask for are for them to check that they will be able to make their money, get their money back once they've given you the money, because they're in the business of making money, right? So for me, it was really about what are just the low hanging fruits that I think anybody going into business should know, like an SME, that they should know, that they shouldn't struggle to know. Rather, let them struggle with the complicated side of business, which is managing customers and clients and innovating around their products and services. But for the simple stuff, um, it shouldn't be difficult. And so that's why I decided to write the book. And I also didn't want it to be a text heavy book. So it's very light. It's very much infographics. Do this, think about this, written in a simple way. And it really is just a how-to guide, how to, start a business. And so that's why. And I think your question about the most overlooked, funny enough, I think it's right towards the end. I I decided, actually, let me include customer service. And so what made me think about putting in customer service, and funny enough, was that my career started in customer service. So in corporates, I started off in logistics and customer service. And funny enough, I hated it, but I am so grateful that my career started off there, because business is about serving the customer. It's not about you. It's not about it's about serving the customer. And I think if I had to do a second edition of the book, I wouldn't put customer service at the end. I would probably bring it up front, because at the end of the day, your business doesn't exist if you don't have paying customers or clients. So I would say that's probably the most underrated part of the book.
You speak about, business coaching and stuff. That's where you started your entrepreneurial journey. So, like, do you think it's the perfect pathway to actually enter with no with less risk of failing in a business space? Because you cannot quit your job. You can actually make it a side gig at the same time while you're working.
You maybe what I will say with to answer that is I don't know. Um, so for me, starting off in coaching, and coaching businesses, as I said, was I knew I had the time, I knew I had the skills, I knew I had the knowledge, and so it really came from a point of I want to help, and that wanting to help turned into something else. So I would say is that coaching is also a skill. So you can't just wake up and say, I'll coach on the side. It's a skill. And if you can't coach, you're not going to have customers. You know, I could have said, oh, I'm going to start baking. But you know what? I would not have any customers because I am terrible in the kitchen. So nobody except my family who maybe wants to support me to a certain extent would buy my baked goods, right? So I think what I'm saying with that is that if you want to start a side hustle, start with something that you're passionate about and you know you have the skills or can learn the skills to do and give value to your customers, because that's literally what it's about. It's doing something where you know you're going to do a great job at and people are going to come back. Um, and so I guess that's my answer. So the answer is coaching. I don't think so. It could be anything else. For me, it was coaching. But it could be, you could be great at tutoring maths. That could be an initial side hustle. You know, your best friend could be great at, I don't know, football, and can go say, I can give kids after school football lessons. And that's a way that could start. They make some, generate some income. And then as the opportunities kind of open and show up, then you continue to pursue those opportunities. So for me, it's more about that. But also, Langa, more importantly, less about what you're doing. It's about having a clear goal, like knowing why you are doing and the reason why you're doing it. I think we undervalue just having that very clear goal. So the one thing I was very clear of is that even when I was still in corporate, I either wanted to be a general manager, and so I knew I wanted to run businesses. So either wanted to be a general manager or I wanted to start my own business and be an owner of my own business. So I'd always had that goal. So for me, whether it turned into consulting or maybe could have been something else, that that vision was always very clear. That goal was always very clear from an early age.
How can small businesses in Africa embrace sustainability without feeling overwhelmed or under-resourced?
Phew, sustainability is a big topic. It's a big topic. So um, funny enough, was just doing a program this week, and the project is on the Sustainable Development Goals, and it's, I mean, 17 SDGs. These are huge, looking at everything from no poverty, zero hunger, all the way to peace, justice, and something institutions. I always forget that last name, but you know, um, the topic is so big, and all the 17 goals are really quite relevant to our lived experience in South Africa and I think other countries on the continent. And so I would say is that sustainability is big, but look at what's relevant to you. So, for example, you're a geologist, you're a scientist, right? Um, and you could say that, okay, how would I use my skills as a geologist to try solve some of the problems, maybe for life underwater or for responsible consumption, where responsible consumption has to do with mining. And, so how do you use the skills that you have to solve some of the problems from a sustainability perspective? Right? So, are you going to be going into climate? Are you going to be going to environmental sustainability? Or are you going to go more to the social side, into reducing poverty? But how do you reduce poverty? Or zero hunger. There's so many sub-targets as well under those SDGs. So which sub-target is the one that you want to look at? So I think for me, it's about knowing where you can add value, but also don't underestimate starting small. Sometimes you want to solve the big problem, but you could start off by just saying, well, what's the problem in my community? What's the problem in my community that I can solve? And when you solve that, can I create value for others? When you create value for others, those people, then can you capture that value, which then are they willing to pay you? And I've seen so many, so there's a stage in my business where I was coaching a lot of social entrepreneurs, and I met a lot of young people like your age, Langa, who who were, I mean, there's one lady I'm thinking of right now in Soweto. She used to come back home and she used to see that kids are just playing on the street. So she decided to bring them in and tutor them in her mother's kitchen. So That's if you look at the SDGs, quality education. Um, and then more and more kids started coming. So she moved to her mother's garage. And then she realized that she can't sustain this. So she started asking for 50 Rand a month. And then she looked for university students to come help her. And now she's just grown bigger and expanded. So can you see just a small problem and you start small. So a lot of people think start big and then you hear that, oh, but I don't have the money, I don't have this, I don't have that. Whereas you actually have so many resources around you. Look at what you're doing. You're leveraging Zoom. I don't know where you are, you're at rest or you're at home, but you're using some internet, right? We have all these resources around us. And sometimes it's literally about stopping and thinking and saying, what's around me? What can I leverage? And guess what? When you don't have that resource, consider an exchange of service. You go to someone who has the resource that you need and say, hey, I'm willing to volunteer and do X if I can have access to Y. I did that in my early days. Couldn't afford an office, but I knew that I needed to be in the greater Sandton area to at least be able to, attract the right clients and having the right address. And I was fortunate enough to meet an old friend who needed my skills, and we had an exchange of service. So for a year, I had an office within her company, and I gave them probably, I think, 10 to 15 hours of my time in exchange for the rents for the month. So an exchange of service, so for my thing, I guess to answer you is there's so many opportunities in the problems that are around us. Start small, leverage the resources that you have around you. They may not be yours, they can be other people's resources. And most of the time, people are willing to help you. And you picking up the call, you cold calling. I could have said no, because that's the worst thing that somebody can say is no. But a lot of the time, people say yes, and people are willing to help.
Uh, thank you so much for that. Okay, as a successful woman in business, what unique challenges have you faced, and how have you learned to lead through them?
Mm. Phew, that's a tough question. It's a tough question, because there are challenges every day. I think if I look at my earlier days, I would say some of the challenges I faced were around, you know, um, refining the business model of what I'm doing, and how to charge people and how to consistently get income. So those were some of the initial challenges that came in. And then later on, as I started to grow, it's about how to find the right talent. Um, I went through, stumbled a lot until I found a really great young man who came to work with me in my early days. And then other challenges come with that as well. Is that, oh, now I have someone working with me, but at the time I was working from home. Now I need to find an office. And so, but finding the office in the right place. And so those challenges, funny enough, when I think about some of those early challenges, it was just also a lot of the times we don't want to talk about our challenges, want everything to seem like everything's okay. But as I think about those challenges, when I was complaining about, oh my gosh, I'm not finding the right people, it was a client who said to me, hey, I know someone who's like this, and knowing you, I think you'd be a great fit. When I changed offices from the one I told you that I was in to another one, again, was in a space where I was like, oh, I think I'm outgrowing that space and also that business is growing. I think it's time for me to exit as a business consultant, but now it means that I need to find another office. And then this person was like, oh, actually, I have so much space. I have this huge office and there's only three of us, and you can use the other half of it. So, um, so I mean, as I speak about it now, it seems like small challenges, but at the time, it felt like a big challenge. But I think what I recognized is that never sit with those challenges alone. Speak to someone, share with someone, and a lot of the times, people are willing to help. Um, Other challenges I've faced, um, business partners. I've tried to go into business with other people. Over there, it's been a challenge because you're different individuals. You work and operate differently. So I've had two business partners before. It didn't quite work out, so I've gone back to kind of working on my own. So yeah, so I won't say they're unique challenges, but they're definitely the challenges that just come top of mind in a sense. Yeah.
Okay, before we close off, want us to just get into um okay, let me just close off like this. Yeah, let me close off like this. What's one philosophy or book that you live by, and what's the best advice you would give to any aspiring entrepreneur?
Ooh, um, let's see. Just give me a second. So the book, The Alchemist. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I remember reading that book, and I think I was still working in corporate, and mm, it just inspired me. It just deeply inspired me. And just recognizing that, the world responds to you and that there's a path for you, and that you will meet teachers along the way. And just I keep thinking of the young boy in the Andalusian mountains and the sheep. And I remember the particular dream that he had when he was kind of lying out there in the field, and how that kept coming back to him, and then the challenges when he went into the mountain and so forth. And it resonated deeply with me. And it just made me, I think it made me reframe how I view challenges and how I view obstacles, that they are lessons for me to learn, so that I don't wallow in the sorrow or the mistakes, because something better will happen. And that also you must remain humble, and that your teachers will not come in the way that you think a teacher will look. Your teacher will come in different forms, and you need to be open to just listening and learning. So I guess that's my advice, maybe to budding entrepreneurs, is that this journey of entrepreneurship, you hear a lot of people say it's a lonely journey. And it is, to a certain extent, it is. But it can be less lonely if you put the right people around you. You do what you're doing, reach out to people, you ask for advice. Um, and that makes it less lonely. But you got to be willing to listen and willing to learn. And then from listening, you take what's relevant. So if you're listening to me now and you're like, oh, so I'm going to go, no, take what's relevant for you and your journey and move with that. And ultimately, for me, when I look specifically at who I've coached and the people who've been able to succeed or kind of stay in the game, the issue has never really been the business. The issue has been the mindset of the individuals that I've come across. So it's about developing that mindset to say failure is is an opportunity just to learn where you went wrong, what you need to change, what you need to do differently. It's the fact that things are going to be difficult, but you've got to be resilient. It's recognizing that you've got a network, and networking doesn't mean that you've got to try and know people who are up there. People up there don't have time for you. Find your peers, right? Find your peers. And for me, that's the advice. It's the mindset. At the end of the day, do you have the right mindset that will allow you to just push through, manage those challenges, and just take everything a step at a time?
Thank you so much. It's been an honor interviewing you today, Nokwazi. Thank you for coming through to the platform and giving me a leg up.
Thank you. Yeah, I love it when I see young people just taking that step. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you,
Looking
man.
forward to what this turns out to be. And it's all about starting like this. Like